So I don't even know if this is a topic.
Okay.
What I am talking okay, there is a topic here, but so the topic at hand, or the thought I'm having is agile leaders practicing what they preach, eating their own dog food, taking part in the agile way of things instead of whatever they're doing now. That's
Going first.
that's okay. Let's go with
Le-
that. Going
leaders going
first,
first.
even though they're probably in an organization that's already going, and it's just the leaders haven't gone first yet. So now you're trying to retrofit leader engagement into whatever's going on.
That's an interesting, because not to nitpick, but I would wonder in what sense is, if the leaders aren't going, in what sense is the organization going, right?
Well, and define what you mean by going.
Yeah, right.
So,
Exactly.
right. So going could be we have a desire for an agile transformation, and that is underway. Okay. A leader had to greenlight that activity. So in that sense, you could say leaders went first. But it's not a spectator sport.
Right.
An agile transformation isn't just okay, go forth and do whatever you were going to do in that agile space. You need a participation trophy. And I think that
Yeah.
is frequently what we see where organizations kind of stumble, right? The teams are doing, the agile ceremonies, and they're being coached, and they're trying to be agile, and they're being and they're doing retrospective, they're doing all this stuff, and the leaders are just looking down from on high going, well, when are the velocity numbers going to pick up? It's
Yeah.
not.
Is there a question about what does it mean to go? I mean, because sometimes, I'm not going to use the word mental models, but the question is, what does this mean, right? It's like, again, you could transform at the level of processes, but is that really
Well,
transformation?
that's not transformation. That's just adopting a new process. One
Right.
could argue.
Yeah, I would.
So, so go further with that then. So when you say, even if it was a mental model, what is the mental model that you're trying to bring forth from a leadership team? And we can talk about it from different levels, right?
Yeah.
There's sponsor level, then there's kind of the middle layer.
I think so. I guess the critical thing in my mind, we talked about this a little bit last week with the budgeting thing. It's like, so let's assume you're doing a transformation in IT or tech or something, and you're at least starting there. And maybe you recognize that it's going to affect the other parts of the organization, but you're starting maybe with the tech people because that's a natural place. It's a common pattern. The question is, do you see IT as a cost center, or do you see them as a value creation center? Right? That would be, I think, maybe one of the fundamental mental models. Because if you see it as a cost center, if you see it as a place where you want to minimize the amount that you spend, then you're going to be naturally thinking about how to make sure everybody's busy, because you're paying for them and you want to make sure you're getting the maximum out of this thing you're paying for, as opposed to taking into account the relationship between what they do and the value that they create, and having all the ways of understanding, defining the value, measuring the value. That's a whole road to go down in terms of how to do that well.
Right.
So I would say that's the main mental model. Is like, is this a thing that you can outsource and just like minimize your bill on it? Or is it a thing that is central to is it a central part of how you create value for your users, right? Is it the steak in the restaurant, or is it the napkins? Right? I would say you'd never outsource your steak. Like, you need a chef. You need to have that person in house. You need to have a daily conversation. I don't care where the napkins come from, as long as they meet a certain, like, spend as little as possible as you can on the napkins. And understanding what is your steak and what is your napkin, I think, like, it comes before the transformation process. Like, if you're not clear on what your steak is, then how are you gonna organize around that value?
Okay. So let's accept that. Let's accept that We want to start thinking of development as a value creation center, that
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to maximize outcome and value, not output, not activity level.
Yeah.
So that's going on. You've got teams that are heading down that path. You're giving them the support and whatever, and trusting them to get the work done. Say you're doing that.
Totally.
What's the rest of the organization doing? I think that's where the place I want to explore is focusing, because we talked about in the past, we talked about, when do you bring HR into this mix? When does, when do you start changing the way you do finance? Even if you manage to get, it's like the first level of management, that's the ones that's in charge of watching over the people, right? They're the managers of the human resource,
Mm-hmm.
right? And make sure they're advancing and they're happy and they're doing all that stuff, and they're they view their job as allocation of those resources toward problems. We're trying to say, don't allocate the resources, assign them to a product area and leave them there. Just
Right.
stop with the subdivision. So you're in the midst of that, but there's a layer above that. Maybe it's one layer below sponsorship. There's the people who are driving the agile transformation from within. And that's where you'll get an enterprise coach sitting down alongside these people, or, at something along those lines. What are those people doing? And what should those people be doing? How do they approach the important work of transforming the organization? Are they just rendering decisions and saying, and aiming coaches at problems, or are they approaching the work in an agile way themselves? Are they mirroring the behaviors? And so that's where I'm getting at with the eating your own dog food or practicing what you preach. We profess that it would be good for this organization to be focused more on value delivery. And to that end, we are training teams, we are coaching teams, we are getting teams up to speed. And we're running this activity as what? As a waterfall project? As a disassociation? That's what I'm keen on exploring.
Well, and I think what we see is so many of these, I'll call them transformation projects or initiatives, but they're not really transformation. They're just transformation in name only. But they call themselves agile transformation, and yet they conduct it in a very phased, waterfall-y, if you want to say, manner. And so therein, I think, lies part of the problem. Why do these transformations fail? Well, they haven't bought into the whole idea of what does it mean to be agile. And so if you're trying to, I'll call it conduct, because I guess in a traditional sense, maybe you're charged with conducting this transformation, which I would argue is the other problem.
Mm-hmm.
You're not conducting, you're trying to help facilitate, but I'm not going to digress on that for the moment. But if you're conducting this transformation, do you get what we're trying to accomplish?
Right.
And how are you going to facilitate that? So, organizational impediment removal, I think, is one huge job that that gooey middle can focus on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not expecting the CEO, the executive level, I'm not expecting them to jump in and remove all the impediments. There's a ton of impediments in any structural part of the organization. Doesn't mean that I don't expect buy-in, practical application where it makes sense for the executive level to formulate strategy, listen to the market, make decisions about, where are we going next, all that sort of stuff. But there's a ton of other impediments beneath that I don't expect them to get into. But
Right.
that GUI layer, that layer that you're talking about, Mike, I do expect them to acknowledge, investigate, uncover where are those impediments, because if they're transforming appropriately, those impediments should be bubbling up on a
Yeah.
regular basis. And what are you going to do about it? Oh, we can't do anything about that. That's just the way we
Well,
do things.
and what concerns
Yeah.
me is without a agreement or alignment that you're the person on the hook to do something about that, or you're the group, the collective on the hook to address those organizational impediments, how does that happen? And so I think so this is the thing that I think is missing. Is like when we looked at Scrum at scale, there was the executive action team that was clearly put in the path of escalations from the Scrum cycle, right? I think I'm describing an executive action team concept, and with any team structure, there's some governing
Working agreements.
framework around it, whether you're working from but there's got to be some level of just a responsibility, not responsibility, racy, what's the A?
Ooh,
Accountable.
Accountability. There's got to be a level of accountability, right?
What's the
Like who's accountable for the
Yeah.
removal of the organizational impediments? And I think that if you are one of these executives or sub-executives or close to the top but not the top and not the bottom and not the middle, whatever those guys are, those are the people who tend to be in the executive action team, right? They're like department heads, or they're and if they don't function as a team, they're almost functioning as nothing. It's like they're just there. They're windowed, right? So we don't have a backlog of organizational impediments for them to address, right? There should be one. But I've seen so many times where you say, hey, maybe we should make a list of things that you guys could change. And they all look and go, what, who, me? Like, what? Like,
Not my job.
Why are you looking at me? I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at all of you. Look at all y'all, the team. I'm looking at this team. You guys have backlog items that have been, and there's always this, but we're really busy people. We can't, we don't have time to do all this other stuff. Our jobs.
Let's talk about your jobs.
Very busy.
What is your job?
Yeah.
What would you say you do here, Bob? This is exactly right. I need my CEO to be like, I understand. I'm not going to get in the weeds, but we're going that way. And I'll tell everybody that I meet, we're going that way. So everybody knows. But yeah, Mike, you're talking about the layer below that, the person who actually is tasked. This is where the models come up. It's like, oh, I should be looking for these impediments, right? And I should be, the most effective people in that role are always the ones with the greatest humility, right? Who are like, well, this is what I think, but I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to new ways. Because by definition, somebody here needs to learn. Otherwise, why are you transforming? And the natural tendency for people is always to be like, the learning that needs to happen should happen over there in that person. Right?
Yeah. That I'm authorizing them to learn.
I'm in charge. I wrote the check. That means you do something, and I watch. And the willingness to challenge that inner mindset is, I think, the biggest thing. Because if you do that, you can figure the rest of it out. But if you're just waiting for other people to transform this thing, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. if you don't look for ways that you can, and I don't know
If
if I
you're
want to
that
say that.
leader, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if I want to say, do you want to look for ways to be useful? Because that is
Ooh.
often the criticism that we give people is they're looking for an unstructured way to be useful. And I guess I'm proposing that there should be a structured way of helping. Like if you created an executive action team, whatever you called it, that agrees that their job is their backlog of actions is going to be basically made up of organizational impediments
Yeah.
that they have to help mitigate or find solutions to. And this is not easy work. This isn't like, you're gonna think about this for an hour and whip out a solution. These are
Tough
hairy,
problems.
audacious problems, right? It's gonna take every bit of the creativity that these people can muster to come up with potential solutions, and maybe even come up with an experimental approach to addressing those solutions.
Totally.
Right, which is a very agile way to do it. Jeff, are you trying to?
So if at the outset of an initiative, you were to lay out, not in excruciating detail, but to say, I'm laying the groundwork here for transformation, and this is kind of what it might look like. Um, the teams are going to do what they do, and you're going to discover bottlenecks, blockers, impediments, and some of those will be organizational. And so instead of even saying, you need an EAT or whatever, any kind of formal structure, I would ask them, here, I'm going to lay this out. This is typically how this might work
Yeah.
as in your march, in your journey. At a certain point, fairly early on, you're going to discover that there are impediments that are beyond the capability of the team.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to do with those?
Yes.
And then, who's going to do that? Here's
Who's
the thing.
responsible
You're
for
trying
that?
to back into them defining or redefining their role. Because it's not just, you guys go forth and be agile. It's, what are we going to do to further the agility of this organization? And if I'm planning on being part of this organization going forward, and that may be in question, then what's my role? Because yes, Mike, too often we see that gooey metal just kind of in limbo. Okay, so what does that mean for me? Oh, there's work for you. Trust me, there's work for you. Well, I've got all this other reporting and stuff like that I've got to get done, and it leaves them in limbo. And I think that limbo state should scare the heck out of them. It would scare the heck out of me. So I don't know. Maybe that's a source of fear.
So Jeff, what I hear you, the thought that I have when I hear you describe that situation is you're trying to tell me if this is what you were thinking. You're trying to get people to think about how to manage the system as opposed to how to manage individual people and what they do with their time.
Yes.
Because that's one of the best outcomes for leadership is because typically, I think it's fair to say leadership before transformation, one of the reasons to do it is because they lack transparency. They feel like they're not in charge of the system, or they don't understand why it's not going faster, or like they don't understand why it's not happening. They feel like they're sort of at the mercy of this thing and they don't really drive it or control it. And when you give people the opportunity to be like, well, here's the system that we've built. Here's the reasons why we can't go faster, right? If you lose, like the theory of constraints kind of, here's your bottleneck. If you want to go faster, you can put more people on this team. Or if you want to go faster, you can upgrade this system, right? Or if you want to go faster, you can change the way this contract is structured. That's what you can do as a leader. Until you do that, we are constrained and we won't go any faster. So this is your system. You tell me how fast you want it to go and what you're willing to do to make that happen. And understand that we've given you the transparency, the metrics, whatever it is, to understand that people are not just waiting. They're not being lazy. They're not waiting around. People are fully committed. They're working as hard as they can based on the definitions that they've got of what the work is. But we've reached the limit of the system, and now it's up to you to manage the system and to give us to turn around and say, okay, now that based on all we've learned, how are you going to upgrade the system? And then it's completely, and then there's no more questions about why aren't we going faster? Where's my stuff? Right? Why am I pointing my finger at IT? No, IT is, you understand everything about how the system works at the high level enough to make decisions about how to make it faster or more capacious. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But we've eliminated that impetus, right, for transformation. It should be very empowering for leaders to be in that position, don't you? It should be, right?
Well,
okay, but it's the same as it's empowering to a team to be given autonomy to be able and the responsibility to be able to choose their own path. And that's a well too for a lot of people. Going back to just tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's the same human problems underneath. Like it looks like an IT system. It looks like an organizational problem. It's really a human. Like there's human dynamics underneath all of this stuff that sometimes you have to get to where you can't fix the system.
If we
That's
as
what I'd say.
coaches help, again, at the outset, to help them to redefine the boundaries. Because here's the thing. If they're unfamiliar with this agility thing, what is it? Anything goes? No, it's not anything goes.
It's remarkably disciplined. It's way more disciplined than they would expect typically, right?
But they're unfamiliar with it. And so, it's as if I put you on a plane and I say, okay, Matt, go on, take off. You're like,
no. It's too much risk.
I could go for it.
What am I doing?
I'd give it a shot.
I know people who would go for it. Absolutely. And I would not be on that plane.
So you have to give them some direction, some kind of boundaries, and it's almost as if you're redefining some of the boundaries. This is what you did before. Here, you're going to end up during this transformation with a boatload of, some impediments, structural organizational impediments. Your job is going to be to help ameliorate them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's got to be scary.
Right. Okay. So to backtrack, you had started to go down this path a little earlier and you had said, ask them, what do you want to do with those? So the statement is you're going to be faced with these organizational impediments. What do you want to do with those? Right. And the jump between that question and what they do day by day is what comes out of that answer. Right. Because their answer might be, well, I'm going to pick somebody on my staff to own that problem, and then I'm going to have them go fix it, which is a solution.
That's
but then
solution.
Where's the, but we don't just say, go fix the problem. We have a follow-up thing. We have a review of the outcome, right? So where is that review of the outcome? Where is that, if not daily, that periodic update with each other on how things are progressing? Right.
Now, where is it? I think it depends is the answer. A typical consultant.
What a consultant.
It depends. And here's why. If you try to force fit, this is the mechanism, and you're going to meet daily. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't meet daily.
I'm not saying they should meet daily. I'm just saying they need to meet occasionally.
But yes, they definitely need to be synchronizing. And some impediments are a lot more difficult than others. And so maybe they spend some time breaking one of those impediments down into smaller chunks. Whatever you want to call that. And and they can begin to track. And so the same behavioral patterns that we're asking teams at the delivery level to do, small chunks.
Mm-hmm.
They get a big hairy monster, and a lot of these organizational impediments are nothing but big hairy monsters. And so what do we do with big hairy monsters? We break them down into smaller hairy monsters and then break them in even further. And you see what I mean? And so then they begin following that same pattern of behavior that we're asking the delivery teams to follow. But they're not used to this. They're not
No.
expecting this. I mean, everybody's in this, oh, that's a big hairy monster. Oh, that'll take years to figure that out.
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
just
I don't
how
wanna
we do
that.
things around here.
Exactly.
We don't.
Put it on the steering committee agenda, and we'll talk about it then.
Well, who's the steering committee in this?
Right, exactly. It's not really a solution. Yes, I talk a lot about patterns, and so I can't remember who came up with this phrase, but exploiting the hidden simplicity, I think, is something I think about a lot. I can't remember who said that, exploring the hidden simplicity. Because if you look at these systems, just like what Jeff was talking about, the same pattern that you teach to individual Scrum teams is the same pattern that the EAT will use, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, the what versus how is a basic thing that you've got all over the place. It's when you can start to see through the system on those basic lines, it gets a lot simpler because people are looking for complex. Eli Goldratt actually is the person, maybe is what I'm thinking of, because the theory of constraints person creator, because he's like, this is actually really simple, guys. Like, you're staring at all the details and you're missing the forest for the trees. If you look at it this way, it's not that complicated. It's that people have all this resistance against doing stuff because then they have to change how they do their work, and they have to take new responsibilities, and they have to learn stuff, and they have to have the willingness to be terrible at something new for a while until they get good at it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or they're going to look at their already packed schedule and say, I don't have any more capacity to do more.
And this is how we do
and
it.
This
here.
is more.
Yeah, 100%.
So, Mike, I think that's a place to explore, because what do we inevitably walk into? People that already have, in that middle layer, already packed schedules.
Mm-hmm.
And how to help them understand, what's of value, what's of less value, what's expendable. And maybe, I don't know, I don't have the answer here. Maybe it's a matter of saying, well, here's another log for the fire. Sorry. This organizational impediment amelioration. And let's prioritize it. And so then maybe some of the other stuff naturally drops off the bottom. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that, because if you think about it, this is what this supposed executive action team would be involved in. They are experiencing the resource who is assigned to way too many projects problem. That this is just one more thing that's on their plate. It's another thing they have to divide their time against and manage relative priority in their own head against. They've got nobody setting absolute priority over everything on their backlog, their personal backlog. And here we are saying, and so here we would be suggesting the creation of a new backlog, that you are on a team responsible for maintaining that too.
So sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was just curious. So is the situation kind of like people are trying to cut down trees as fast as they can, and you're saying maybe if you sharpen the saw, you could cut faster, and they're like, I have no time. There's too many trees.
Yeah.
And they're never going to, until they find a way to find some time to sharpen, they're never going to get faster. They're never going to work their way out of this hole. Is that kind of the situation?
Well, I think that's probably a true statement, but I don't think they would even, I don't think they would even look at that metaphor and go, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It's like, because what you're proposing isn't their saw. What's on this list isn't making their personal life better. This is making the teams below them's lives better.
But they own the teams in the fiduciary sense, don't they? Like, aren't they?
That's maybe.
Okay.
That's unfortunately, that's a big maybe, is who actually they don't own the teams generally. They own the processes. They might be, I don't know, PMO folks or governance or some, in a matrix organization, these people could be so far laterally removed from the actual people doing the work, right? All you can do is look at it from a nebulous, you guys own the transformation, and this is an impediment to the transformation. So who is responsible for addressing that stuff? And I think at first blush, when we come to them and say, hey, here's a list of problems, what do you want to do about them? That's, I think, Jeff, that's the key moment right there, is how do we build a structure around the doing something? Because if we don't, these are going to fall prey to the same forces of multitasking that everyone else's lists come to. We give backlogs to teams, and we have organized structures around the doing of things to allow them to focus on to get them the time to focus on solving the problems. And these executives, without adhering to a structure, admitting to a structure, or aligning themselves to some sort of action plan, are leaving these items to the wind. These are, if I remember to do something about this, it's a way of manufacturing accountability or manufacturing opportunities for accountability, I think.
So based on the changing requirements, I'm going to change my answer. I think you need to charter your EAT.
Okay.
What would you say you do here, Bob? And the executive action team. Why are we looking at this list of things? Right? How does the team work? What do they own? What do they not own?
Mm-hmm. And so to have that conversation, you have to at least have it's like you're coming in and saying, we need to build some structure to answer the following question. Here is a list of organizational impediments. What are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm. And the reason I back into it instead of starting with a structure is because I'm always hesitant to add structure when we're trying to simplify things, and it is going to meet with resistance. I don't have time to be on a committee. It's not a committee. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
I want
so
them to pull
instead
that
of
in.
that,
so I
present them with the problem. How do you wish to solve this?
Make it their idea.
I can give you some suggestions, but it's your problems. You need to contribute.
Yep.
And so if you come in there and say, well, we need to talk about forming an executive action team, you're going to get instant resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
They're going to see structure. They're not going to understand the need. So,
but if you tell them your system is slow and here's why your system is slow and it's up to you to do something about it or not. And by the way, would you like a mechanism to see more of these things that are holding you back, that are the key to solving the problem that you care about, right? Get them to pull it themselves instead of pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the same thing that we talk
buy-in.
about, we teach teams these concepts. When we walk into a team and one developer is taking on all this stuff, everybody just kind of, yeah. Or everybody's stretched too thin. What are the things that we teach them? We teach them about, the fallacy of productivity and multitasking. That sort of thing. And so those same concepts apply, whether it's at the team level or at the middle level or at the executive level. The same concepts are applicable, right?
Yes.
And so what will we do at the team? Now, the way we describe things, the way we correlate things in the language might be a little bit different, but I think some answer has to be, we're still imparting those concepts into them without forcing a structure. Let them define the structure. And, if they want to call it an EAT, okay, great. I don't care what you call it.
Yeah.
But as long as it's functioning in the way that you described as, okay, at some periodic point, we get together, We talk about, what are these impediments? We prioritize them. We break them down, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So how are we going to demonstrate progress? How are we going to know we're done? What's our acceptance criteria? So the difference between the analogy you just said, though, is we don't usually in these situations give the teams a choice. We actually say we're going to put you into a structure of our leadership's
we do.
choosing, right?
You are correct.
So we don't get. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of the things we try to do in an introductory Agile course is try to get them on board with the idea of going down the Agile path by demonstrating to them what could be in it for them, right? We try and get them to buy in, but the presumption still is you're going to be formed into teams and you're going to function in this new Agile way, and here's the rules of the road. Right. That when you learn them and adopt them, you will see the value of it. But we don't take that same stance with the leaders because it's a two-tier justice system. I don't know. It's because
That's why humility is the most important quality in a senior leader, right? Because it's a really hard human challenge to be like, look, I get paid to know the answers. I get the big office, right? I get the status. Everything
The
in your
cube.
but everything in your like organizational context is reinforcing the idea that you're in charge, you know what it is that needs to be done, you should have the answers. And to have a person in that situation show up and be like, I don't know, could you teach me something? I think I might be missing something, let me be open. That's hard. And then to turn around and direct the organization based on the stuff you just learned about yourself, that's
Yeah.
way harder than just pulling stories off a back. Like, nothing wrong with being a individual contributor, but like different challenge, much harder, I think.
yeah. And to build off that, it's my job to have the big answers. It's like that's why you get the big problems. That's why your backlog
Totally.
has more challenging things than everyone else's backlog.
That's
And
what the
yours are
money is
more-
for. Like, there's a
Yeah.
bunch of reasons why it makes sense, but it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you get the holistic problems. You don't get the well-defined tactical implementation problem. You get the thing that involves adjusting the human elements.
Totally.
And the organizational elements, the system. You used the word system before. Systems are any collection of a thing, right? Any collective. We as a podcast group are a system.
Totally.
When we work with our clients, that's a system. When the organization, there's multi-systems within systems and systems everywhere.
Yep.
Systems thinking gets pretty interesting.
It is fascinating, honestly. Yeah. Especially the complex adaptive ones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I feel like we have.
That sounded like a heavy pause.
Well, I just, I was sitting here and I'm feeling, I just had this sudden thought. It feels like this has been
An
this
Agile thing?
Yeah, this one.
This one.
This Agile thing. I think I've been Matt Beam.
I've been Mike Markey.
And I'm still Jeff Singleton.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yes, we will.
Ciao for now.
Yes, we will.